This is The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Jake Johanssen is here, the comedian who has, through the decades, continued to be funny. He started with Letterman, Tonight Show with Carson. Letterman gave him his own development deal for his own show, and Jake has continued to fill houses and to make audiences laugh. He's coming off an international tour. We'll talk about that. J.Elvis Weinstein, our resident comic, documentary filmmaker, who actually, by the way, his film, I Need You to Kill, has a connection to Jake, which is revealed at the end of the episode. For those of you who actually make it to the end of the episode, something to look forward to. We start the show with Michael Shure, who will talk about coming nose to nose with the Stanley Cup, and then we'll get into what's happening on the southern border. Support our show by going to Amazon.com, but don't do it by going to Amazon.com. Don't do it. Go to our website, edge-show.com. Click on the Amazon banner. That will take you to Amazon.com. That's right. It's the same Amazon as you would normally shop, but because you come through our website, edge-show.com, we get a little piece of whatever you spend. We don't know what you spent. We don't know what you bought, but at the end of the month, they'll spin off a little percentage of what everybody spent on Amazon if they click through our site, edge-show.com. It's a great way to support the show. The other way to support the show is by leaving us something in our virtual tip jar. Thank you, those who have. You are an elite group. As I said before, when the big flood comes, you are all who listen to this show welcome in my home. But the people who've left a little something through the PayPal link will be welcome in first. Then we go to the Amazon people, and then everybody else who listens. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, on YouTube, on iHeartRadio. However you find the show, please subscribe. That helps us in the universe of query boxes and all the stuff that I barely understand. And if you can leave us a 5-star positive review on iTunes, that'd be great too. All right, to review, comedian Jake Johanssen, Michael Shure, and of course J.Elvis Weinstein will join with Jake. Let's get started.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
They look, just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
edge-show.com.
Time for the Fast 15, politics and more. He's Michael Shure. Come on. Fresh off holding the Stanley Cup.
Thank you all so much.
I saw the picture of you holding the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I happened on to the upon the Stanley Cup in Washington.
Now, you're a huge hockey fan. You've mentioned on this show several times. For you, it had to be a great thing.
It was great. Interestingly, I came back to that morning in D.C., I went to the Capitals parade. I don't like the Capitals. I never have.
The Capitals play in
the Washington Capitals, and I'm a Rangers fan, and they have not been a friendly a rivalry for a long time. But I wanted them to win the Cup because I like Alex Ovechkin. I like Barry Trotz, their coach, Braden Holtby, their goaltender. I didn't want Vegas to win in their first year. It seemed unfair to St. Louis and Buffalo. We're talking about hockey, and we're on The Edge, and I love it. Okay, so we're going to just talk about it for 30 more seconds. So I go to the parade. It was great. I went back. I went to work. I was there to work. And I come back after a very, very long day. I worked some long days in D.C.
By the way, the parade looked very well attended.
I mean, it was unbelievable.
Don't compare it to the inauguration. I'm sick of those comparisons.
I'm saying there haven't been that many people. This is what I tweeted. I don't think D.C. has seen this many people since the presidential inauguration of 2013. Yeah, it was a sea of red. It was really great. I mean, people were really happy. It was a mix of people, and it was great for hockey. It was great for D.C., all of that. And then, they hadn't won a championship in that city since 1992, which is a long time to not be winning. So that was good. Anyway, so I work my day. I come back to my hotel, and it's a hotel I've stayed in for a lot of nights over the last years.
So they sent the Stanley Cup up to your room?
They did. It was nice to call downstairs, and I'd say I'd like one Stanley Cup.
People don't realize you can order them.
You can't. Well, if you're a regular customer. Anyhow, so I walk in, and the manager of the hotel is there, the front desk manager, and he says, "Mr. Shure, come here." And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Pardon my French, but the fucking Stanley Cup is on the roof bar." I was like, "What?" He said, "The Capitals called us earlier. They said we're all coming over here. We're coming with the cup. Can you close off a private room at the roof bar?" I was like, wow. So I said, "I'm going to go up there." He said, "You can't. It's locked off in the elevator." So he takes me. It was like the Goodfellas scene when they're going through the kitchen at the Copacabana.
Yeah.
Takes me in the back kitchen, around the
steamer
corner,
trays.
yeah, exactly. And we get on an elevator, and it opens up, and it literally opens up right into where this party was. and there's the Stanley Cup.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I mean, for you, Michael Shure worships at the Church of Hockey.
Yeah, I do like hockey. I think it's a great sport, and it really is. I think, and I'm not saying this as a biased hockey fan. I think Mark, who doesn't really follow hockey, would agree that the Stanley Cup sort of supersedes every trophy in sports. Right?
There's a mythology and a reverence about the Stanley Cup that you don't find in any other sport.
It's a little different. I had a friend who played hockey professionally, and I went to visit him in Canada one summer, in the early '90s, and we went to the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is in Toronto, and the Stanley Cup is there, and you can sort of wait online and take a picture. And my friend Dave's like, "No, I'm not going near it. I'm not going. You don't go near it unless if you're a player, unless you win it, you don't even touch it."
Wow.
So anyway,
it's very close. It's like sort of like a sword in the stone type situation.
I guess exactly.
Right?
That's true. That's exactly right. So there was the Stanley Cup, and the goalie Braden Holtby is there, standing with it, and asked if I want to take my picture. Of course, this is a private party.
Asked you?
No. I asked if I could take a picture with it. Sorry, and he asked me if I wanted to hold it up, and I didn't because that seemed silly. So we took a picture standing side by side. He obviously couldn't have been nicer because he's a hockey player, and I just thanked him. And then I wasn't a party to which I was invited, so I looked at the manager of the hotel, and he brought me downstairs, and that was the end of my adventure. But I have the picture, and it was just amazing.
I saw the picture, and it's just extraordinary. I mean, I couldn't understand how it all came together, but there it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've had a charmed hockey life for somebody. I've had a Zelig-like existence in hockey for someone who never played.
All right, so I have to ask you what's going on the southern border.
A little different than the northern one.
And let me just break this out, because people have lit me up on Twitter saying, Mark, these people are breaking the law, and when they break the law, they should be incarcerated. The people we're talking about, who I'd like to talk about, Michael, the people who are coming to the United States for asylum, so they're going to be evaluated to become asylees from violence, from state-imposed terror. But it goes beyond state-imposed. They can be fleeing anything as long as it's not just looking for economic opportunity in this country.
They have to make a case for why they're here, and that's why we have, asylum courts.
But typically we haven't separated their kids from them, which is the most controversial thing that's happened in the last week.
No, white America has separated kids from people over the years, from Native Americans to slavery to Japanese internment camps. They have a shoddy record of that. This, though, I'm sure it seemed shocking to many people at different times throughout history. Slavery notwithstanding, because people let it go on for a very, very long time. But this is, I think, shocking to a lot of people who have never lived through anything like this in America. And this presidency promised to be this in many respects. There's nothing that's going on today in America that wasn't promised in a vigorous campaign by Donald Trump in 2016, as far as immigration is concerned.
This is also that there'll be appropriate funding for a border wall?
This is all about a wall, really. I mean, even the bills that are going to be before the House, there was something called a discharge petition. Without boring you, there were some moderate Republicans who said, wait a second, we can't, I need to win this election. I'm Carlos Curbelo in Miami. I'm Will Hurd in Texas near El Paso. I'm a moderate Republican, quote unquote. I've got to have something that I can tell these people that I want to protect immigrants and DACA and all of that. Well, the Republicans have said, and the leadership in the White House, there is no immigration reform. There's no immigration bill that doesn't have a wall in it. And that is really what's making all of this happen. So all of this on the border right now is being used by the president, by the White House, as a way of proving that they need a wall.
I think I've mentioned on this show before that Stephen Miller's history, particularly in Bannon's as well, is marked by viewing these situations as opportunities, as the controversy and the crisis, if you will, is really what you want. The crisis around the travel ban, it was deliberately done on a weekend and left very vague so that it could reach crisis proportion. That is the modus operandi of Stephen Miller.
Yeah, he's a nativist, and that's how he's working to bring attention to these things. And you can look back at different parts of history in the last 100 years where you see things like this happening, especially in Europe. But it's not reached these shores in this way. And I tell you this. If you're analyzing it purely from the politics of it, right? If you're totally insensitive to what's going on, which you have to be in order to do that, because that's not the first thing you think about is politics. But let's just go into that bubble for a second. I think it's terrible, terrible politics, because I don't think screaming babies, screaming children, Nanette Barragan is a congresswoman from California. She went with Nancy Pelosi to a boys' detention center, one of these that's been put up on the San Diego border, and asked one of the boys there, do you have any questions? And his answer was, when can I see my mother again? You know, this kind of stuff, this is unbelievable that this is happening. So there's no independent voter, or few independents, I shouldn't say no. This is not winning people over. This is energizing or I guess keeping a base together, but it's not inviting anybody new to the party, which should be of some comfort on the other side too, because it means that this will probably be repudiated. But before it is, it may be law, and it may remain law. And the laws that are trying to be passed by the Congress right now on immigration are pretty strident. I don't think they're going to pass the House. Certainly the Goodlatte bill, which is the most restrictive of these bills, will not pass. The second one, they need 218 votes. I don't think they're going to get the so-called compromise bill that's coming from the White House, the House leadership, and some of the moderates, because I don't think they're going to have it. And Mitch McConnell says, we're not going to do immigration, so it's not going to matter. But then you have status quo if you don't have it. And that's why I think this is politically going to help change the House of Representatives.
Feels like there's a lot of blowback.
Yeah.
Mark Sanford was very critical of Donald Trump. Tell everybody who Mark Sanford
Mark
was.
Sanford is a former governor of South Carolina, famously, or I guess infamously, lied about where he was. He was having an affair. He said that he was walking in Appalachia, hiking in Appalachia for a few days when they couldn't find the governor. He was in Argentina with his mistress. He was sort of forced out of office, resigned. Then he came back and he ran for the Congress in the 1st District of South Carolina, where he won, shockingly. He's a pretty conservative guy. He's voted with Trump 89% of the time, but he's also criticized Trump. And he is a well-liked guy by, I'm not, people hear that and they say, oh, how can anybody like him? You have to realize there are 435 men and women in the U.S. Congress, and, even though they disagree and they despise their other's position, there are some that say, hey, that's a good guy, that's a nice woman, all of that. There's some that they think are the worst people in the world on their side, right? They're Democrats who hate Democrats and Republicans who can't stand Republicans. Mark Sanford's a very well-liked guy. He lost in a primary to someone who criticized him for criticizing Donald Trump, Kate Arrington. And the president went on and tweeted Mark Sanford, at Mark Sanford, who voted with him 89% of the time, saying that, that he's been too critical of me, vote for Kate Arrington. Kate Arrington won. It proves, as Sanford said, and said to me, because I interviewed him in Washington the day after he lost, he said, I would not, if I were a Republican, run against this president. It's his party now. Jeff Flake said the same thing to me. So I took a position against this president, and I paid for it. It's something that you shouldn't do if you care about keeping your office. So the Republican Party, make no mistake, Donald Trump, it's his party right now.
And his vision is being informed by the extreme right of the party.
That's exactly right. And now Republicans are afraid of those people. So Republicans who would in other years go against those people are not now, because that's their constituency. So they're now sleeping in the bed that they have made by not standing up at different times in recent history. And there were times that they could have stood up to this and did not.
Well, the interesting thing is that before the Trump momentum began, before he took power, there's sort of the understanding like, believe me, we all know that he doesn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of ignore him and do our thing.
Yeah.
And then in the end, as you suggested, no. I'm going to get what I want, or I'm going to destroy you.
Right.
And because he has the power over the media, I think the media is his
and Twitter.
His bludgeon. Well, that's the media. I consider that the media.
Yeah. And the media eats up those tweets. If they just stop doing, and listen, understand, historically, when a president says something, it's the media's responsibility to report what he's saying. This president speaks through Twitter. And so it's, on the one hand, their responsibility, but on the other hand, boy, wouldn't it be nice to just ignore those tweets, in a perfect world.
You had something for me?
I had something for you. Yeah, there's a story that I thought of you when I read it or saw pictures of it. There's this woman who is a hunter. Her name is Tess Thompson Talley.
I saw this. The one with the giraffe?
Yeah, she's from Kentucky, and she shot and killed a rare black giraffe, and you see her celebrating it, and this dead, beautiful animal is next to her. Somebody wrote to me after I tweeted it. All I just said was I retweeted it and wrote scum. And that was it. And 137 people liked it, and one person responded with with a thoughtful response. This is not somebody who is like me. He says he's a liberal. He's a hunter, right? I don't understand hunting. People say, oh, we need guns for hunting, and I'll let the hunters have their guns as long as we can get rid of the other ones. But I don't even get hunting, to be honest with you. It doesn't seem like sport to kill a bird to me or an animal. So I wrote Scum, and he wrote, it's kind of a more nuanced situation. Usually these trophy hunters will go to game preserves where the money goes toward fighting poachers and conservation. Also, the meat will go to villagers. Without the big game hunters, the people will turn to poaching for revenue. That's one part. I'm going to read a little bit more, Mark, and then I'm going to ask you to respond because you know this. He said, as a hunter myself, it takes more skill than you think, but I don't have a guide showing me where to go either. I agree that rather than showing a picture of the animal, they'd be better off taking a pic with a giant check in the community it's helping. I've never been on a guided safari. This is, of course, over a few tweets, but I can't imagine the hunter has to do very much. They have game ranches in Michigan that have giant pen deer, and it's pretty much the same. I'd never go there. I'm not going to lie. It's weird being a liberal and someone who hunts. I see the macho hunters that like to talk shit just to piss off anti-hunters and vice versa. We both love the outdoors and nature. We need each other to keep our lands protected. Anyway, he seems like a sensible and reasonable person, except that he hunts. But
No, I hear you.
His approach to this was a different one and a thoughtful one.
Yeah, he seems to be making a cogent argument.
Right. So tell me about that argument.
So we'll agree, you and I, that we think taking the life of one of these creatures is an awful thing, but we're going to put it aside for now and just to evaluate the financial part of this.
Yeah.
Well, the idea that villagers get money that sustains the village from North American trophy hunters that go over there and drop $250,000 so that they can hunt an elephant or whatever it may be, that's an oft-heard explanation for why it is justifiable. It's just not true that the money makes it to the villagers. There was one study that found that trophy hunting amounts to less than 2% of tourism revenue in 8 African countries that permit it. Okay?
Right.
2%. So that is not a lot of revenue.
Which also means it can be disposed with very quickly.
You'd think.
Yeah.
The truth is that very little of the money filters down to the villages. Very little of the money. There's no sustainability formula in that part of the equation.
Right.
The other thing that's important from a wildlife perspective is the effects of killing the one animal. You see the one animal. You see the lion. You see the giraffe. You see the elephant, the rhino, etc.
You don't see its cubs. You
don't
see
see its offspring and the way it throws the entire balance of that ecosystem onto its side. And we're devastating these populations.
Right.
When you take the lion out, and this is what happens when that, what was his name?
The dentist?
The dentist lion, I forget his name now.
Yeah.
Cecil. When
Right.
Cecil was killed, his pride, the other lions there, will be killed also, the younger ones, because now Cecil, the dominant male, is gone. So you're building in.
I didn't even know that.
It's not
It's
just
even
that he's going
worse.
that his family, if you will mourn his passing.
Right.
It's that his family's going away. They'll be killed by the next lion that takes over. And these are the economics of extinction, of course, playing out on a much greater level, because the more that you hunt, the more valuable the remaining creatures are,
Right.
and as a result, it's just bigger and bigger money to go over there.
Yeah.
So I would say to that guy, you've bought the lie, and so that's not an argument for defending trophy hunting in any way. And then I would just say quickly, of course, what she did, I think the girl in the picture, she's taking a rare giraffe. I mean, this is
A black giraffe.
I mean,
I'd never heard of it till the picture.
and so that seems like another level of indefensibility. And lastly, the canned hunts, which he did mention, when
Yeah.
people are, they pen up deer or
Yeah,
whatever.
and
it
he
is.
says he doesn't. He's a hunter and he doesn't go on those.
Right, but you take like the Trump brothers, they'll go on
Right.
that kind of canned hunt where they go out there and they go, hey, just put the thing in a 1,200 square foot area and I'm just going to shoot it and stuff it.
A 1,200 square acre area, a lot of right? Isn't it
Yeah,
a
I don't
big
know. I
area?
mean,
it's not like a cave. It's not
I
like
grabbed it. Well, I will tell you one story. When I was in South Africa, they said that a Texas hunter came down and they had some kind of black cat, panther type thing. They had it in a truck, literally a big U-Haul truck. They opened the back of the truck. He shot it. And he said, stuff it. It was literally the ugliest story I think I've ever heard. Not that the rest of these stories are that much better, but I'm saying these things do get on a heinous level, pretty heinous. But that's the word on hunting.
Yeah.
And increasingly, the more it's a little like politics. The more we make the point about, oh, this is just reprehensible, how can you do it? People sort of proudly post these pictures of themselves having killed.
that's the thing. And if you follow the thread, which I did for a moment, and then said, why are you doing this? Not this guy's thread, but her thread. thread of, people writing about her. You're only going to get people defending her that are going to piss you off more than the picture, or as much as. I responded to this guy. I didn't write a response, but I personally emotionally responded to what he said because he was thoughtful and he was earnest, and he brought up some points that I wanted to ask you about, so I'm glad we talked about it.
No, I absolutely agree. Anything we can watch for on I-24?
On I-24 News, just tune us in. Every night we're treating this. If you watch Stateside with David Schuster at 9 Eastern, you're going to get a taste of news that we're going to talk about Yemen when a lot of other people are talking about Kim Kardashian.
And you know something? I lament what's going on at the border and a lot of what goes on with this administration because it does take the spotlight off of other things that are going on in the world and right here in this country that are pretty awful. I'd love to talk about Scott Pruitt, what's happening with the EPA.
Right.
I mean, but that doesn't even get a nanosecond of airtime.
And also economic malfeasance on the part of Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce. In any other time, and how often do we say, if this had been Obama or if this had been 15 years ago, or whatever, this would have been, crisis in an administration unprecedented. Nothing seems to matter.
And Jared and Ivanka with clear conflict of interest, pulling
absolutely
almost $100 million out of the White House.
Right. It's amazing. And when I say nothing seems to matter, I'm not throwing the hat in. I think it will matter. It just hasn't yet.
All right. Michael Shure, thank you for taking a minute. I have to tell everybody, you have to understand, I grabbed Michael Shure out of his day, out of his life, out of his fatherhood.
I love the edge.
So
I do. I'm serious. It's always a pleasure,
So thank you very much for being here. Michael Shure, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Oh, thanks. Bill, how are you?
First of all, it's great to be on the show with all of you and all that and all these things. I love it. And if you enjoy listening to The Edge, subscribe to The Edge on iTunes, the Stitcher, and you can totally listen to it on iHeartRadio.
And now we talk to comic Jake Johanssen. Here's a little bit of Jake on the Letterman show from a while back, just to give you a feel for who Jake is on stage.
Here's Jake Johanssen, everybody. Boy, thanks very much. I feel pretty good. I don't have a lot of time, so this is the thing. We're all getting older, right? I mean, nothing personal. Even babies are getting older, and most of the time you don't feel it, right? Because it happens so slowly, a couple seconds at a time, and it takes something. Then something will happen to make you realize what's really going on. Like I recently hurt myself while I was asleep. If that's never happened to you, the way it works is you go to bed, you're fine, you feel great. And then you wake up and you've got like an athletic type injury. And it hurt like you ran to first base too fast or something. So you walk around and people can notice it and they'll say something to you like, oh, what happened to you? And that's when it gets kind of weird because you're like, I don't know, because I was asleep at the time, and that's bad because normally, if you hurt yourself, you'd like to be able to say, well, I'm not doing that again, right? But I'm not sure what it was, and I have to sleep tonight.
That's a little of Jake. Of course, the show begins with J.Elvis Weinstein and Jake giving me a hard time about the rig I use for the podcast.
XLR inputs into, and it's got its own knobs on it.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
To input Zoom with XLRs.
Yeah.
Straight in.
Well,
Okay, guys, I get it. So you use the two.
No, but yours is better. We get it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
But for $400, you could throw away by volume 2/3 of your shit.
Actually, when I decided to do this, I turned it all over to a guy who was going to turnkey it. He said, you need to order these things. I literally just ordered them as he had prescribed. So listen, I'm not trying to prove a point here. I'm just saying.
The great thing about being the guy that everybody trusts to do the thing that they don't understand how to do is you don't know when they're bullshitting you. I mean, this guy's got you on some 1985 technology. But I'm sure it works great. It's good. Well, you have room here for all that because you don't have a kid. So you can reel this into the baby's room.
Do you do your podcast?
The Jake This podcast.
The Jake This podcast, do you do it in a separate part of the house, or where do you do it? I imagine it in your living room.
No, often I do it in my office. Sometimes I do it in the kitchen if no one's there. But if someone's there, then we have to go to my office, which I like also, but it's kind of all the things that aren't allowed to be in the house are in my office, so it's kind of the inside of my brain. There's mementos and toys, and
Oh, that's cool.
That's kind of how my life is too.
Yeah.
That's the only space that's mine.
You have a wife?
I do.
Yeah. They're great. They're great.
Yeah, absolutely. I can.
They're great. You got to have one.
That's the voice of J.Elvis Weinstein. His movie, which is
I Need You to Kill, about stand-up comedy in Asia, which Jake has a weird connection to that he probably doesn't know about.
I do know about that connection.
All right. And it's called I Need You to Kill. It's streaming on Amazon Prime right now, and it's a delight.
yeah, that's very cool. And you
I
also,
would like to see it, except for feelings of jealousy and then possible is it Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude?
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
wow, how about that?
I know what it is. I don't know what to call it all the time.
I know all the ins and outs of Schadenfreude.
Yeah, I have.
What is
have the feeling.
Schadenfreude, Josh?
It is joy in the misery of others.
Right.
Yeah. It's German, of course.
And Jake is a comedian who has not only prevailed for decades, but I feel as though your act, I've seen it, and it hasn't lost a step. You've been funny for decades, and you're still as funny as you ever were.
But when you say my act, it's my current version of my act. It's not the same act from before. It's not like I'm just still playing the greatest hits.
No,
That's
it's
the sad
true.
thing about stand-up. You can't just go out there and play Satisfaction like the Rolling Stones, those pikers, you know?
No, but it's funny you say that because I was actually thinking this. And by the way, a quick note to the audience: we are doing today's show in a kitchen, and so that's why you're hearing kitchen sounds in the background.
Where do you usually do it?
We normally do it in our quiet. It's our hilltop studio.
Yes.
There's normally not a lot of background sounds. The first part of the show will have some background sounds, but don't be distracted by them.
Just think of it as life going on.
Yeah, yeah. There are other things happening here besides this show today.
It brings a real verisimilitude.
Oh, yes. Well, there is something. What were you saying? Because I had a thought about that.
About not being able to do greatest hits.
Oh yeah, that if I came to one of your shows, because I am a fan of your stuff, Jake Johanssen.
Right, but hypothetically, if you came to one of my shows, instead of just being here at your hilltop fortress, adoring me from afar.
Right. I would, and I think this is true of you and other comics who I'm also, a fan of, that you, in a way, go, oh, I hope he does that bit about blank. There are greatest hits in a way that you do.
But you don't, as an audience member, you think you want that, but
you don't really want it. If you came to a show, maybe if you brought a friend
or something, maybe.
Yeah, if you brought a friend, they might want to hear it. Or I've seen some comics who have had a long career, as I have, with a maybe bigger audience, like they're doing a theater. They have 1,500 people there or something. They do their full show. And then if there's an encore, they'll come back. Or maybe as a regular part of the end of the show, they'll ask if people have any requests or questions. And then oftentimes if you ask for questions, then people ask a question that they know will make you do the bit. But sometimes it includes the actual punchline that comes at the end of the bit, which then makes it hard to do the whole
Takes
thing.
the steam out of the bit a little
and then
bit.
of course, the end is the thing that you've already heard.
So it is the case then that from a performer standpoint, both of you comics agree, it seems, that you don't necessarily want to do the same material for an audience that knows some of the
It's okay. I think it's okay for some people to hear some jokes another time if they're a big fan. But I think most people would kind of want they sort of want to hear your new stuff.
Yeah,
and that's what if you have people who are return customers, usually the compliment you want to hear is a lot of new stuff or love the new stuff or
and also the reality is they can't remember some of, like, if you changed a third of your act, they forget a third.
Right,
they think you did 2/3 of new material.
True. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, the UK, Europe, Australia, the festival model is you do a new hour every year. You do it for a year, you throw it out. I mean, Louis C.K. was trying that for a while. I think that a year is too short, but I think it is good to turn it all over,
Right.
if you can, and then get someone to record it, and then.
That's the thing is now if you have the kind of career where specials are part of your cycle, then it's a good way to go.
Except
that's
now
officially that hour.
Now it almost seems like there's so many Netflix specials that they're not special.
it's
not
certainly not the
special.
brag it used to be. I mean,
Well, it's kind of like Evening at the Improv used to be. Like I was on Evening at the Improv. Yeah, well, so was everybody.
right. The Tonight Show, when you did it with Johnny Carson, Jake, I mean, it was still a mountaintop.
It was a big deal at the time. Yeah, people forget, but that was just That was the gist at the beginning of there being a lot of channels. I mean, not even everybody had cable, or certainly there was no internet way to watch TV. So it was a big deal to be on that show.
Yeah, because there really weren't a lot of other things on. And it was accepted as a place and a platform where you could see some, quote, young comedians or newer comedians. I mean, he did sort of have that spot in the show where you thought occasionally you might see somebody who you didn't know about. I mean, I'm sure when you're in the comic community, you're thinking, well, they're not new to us, but I mean,
but I mean, in 1988 it was when you did it. Yes, the first.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was still a big damn deal to do the Carson show then.
There's a listing here that says 1/5/1989, Jake Johanssen.
Or maybe it was 89, because I did Letterman first. So I did Letterman 87, then I did...
you did Letterman
Carson
first.
movie. Yeah, because at the time, my style of comedy, it's a little bit rambly, and I kind of hesitate and stop, start, stammer, say something, and then reconsider it and say it again. And that's part of the show. But Jim McCauley, the guy at the time who was the gatekeeper for The Tonight Show, he was worried that, he says, yes, of course, I think Jake is funny. This is him talking to my manager. I think Jake is funny, and he always does a great job whenever I see him on stage. But I'm worried if he comes on The Tonight Show that Johnny will think he's nervous, and then that will be bad. We don't want Johnny to think someone's nervous. Wow. And it's just like, well, but if the audience laughs, then surely Johnny will realize that that's the way it's supposed to be. But then after I'd done Letterman a few times and he saw that it worked, and I don't know if Johnny had seen those or not, but then it was like, okay, yeah, he can come on now.
How insulting to Johnny is that assertion that he wouldn't get that your comedy style had a cadence to it?
he more meant it as a protective.
No, I
Johnny,
get it, but still, it's like, come on. Johnny Carson was a pretty sophisticated consumer of comedy.
Well, right.
And it's I don't
know if Jim McCauley is still alive, but I'm not trying to throw him under the bus.
I'm going to bash Jim McCauley because he never put me on the show, first of all.
In retrospect, yes, he was wrong. He was wrong.
Silly.
We know he was wrong.
Yes.
But I mean, we're all wrong sometimes.
All right.
Well, I'm really glad that we're on this because, again, knowing you were going to be here, I started looking around and I found this. And like the first thing I found was this Tonight Show appearance. And I just want to hear, like, do you mind? Will you indulge me 90 seconds of it or not?
I don't know if it's a copyright infringement, but that's fine with me.
All right, here, because I want you to also hear Johnny's intro.
Johnny may be gone, but he still has lawyers.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, here is a young man. It's a good audience tonight for a young comedian making his first appearance on the show. Jake Johanssen, he's going to be appearing at the Punchline in San Francisco, the 17th of this month through the 21st, and he appears frequently at the Improvisation in Hollywood. Would you welcome Jake Johanssen? Jake?
Thank you very much. I'm Jake Johanssen. Very nice to be here. I'm originally from Iowa. Thank you. I haven't been back in a while. It took me a long time to realize that we were free to go.
What's that, Jake?
Well, that joke is celebrating now its 30-something year in show business, and it still works great.
It's so funny.
If I do a corporate gig, I can still do, to a room full of people who don't know who I am, I can still do that joke.
All right, my recollection of this set, this is 30 years old now, is blue shirt, wide tie, maybe brown jacket.
It looks like grays to me, but
okay. Was there a wide tie?
Well, there were a lot of wide ties.
Yeah, I'm just trying to conjure the look. There's glasses, horn rim glasses.
Here's the thing about Jake did have a very distinctive look. Changed that look through the years, but it was always distinctive. Like it was a very 80s look. It struck me, right, with the shoulder pads. But in a way, you're just
well. You don't think you're being. Yeah, I suppose I thought I was being fashionable. You're just trying to be, but it was, now in retrospect, I think everything, no matter what we were wearing at that time, looks foolish. But there were some things that I never had the tie with the piano keys on it.
No, you weren't clounish at all. I don't think.
It doesn't look like
I don't mean to imply that at all.
Doesn't look like he's really trying to brag that he can still remember how you.
Jake was one of the Jake. I was a teenage stand-up in Minneapolis at this time, and in fact, I canceled my prom date to open for Jake. It was one of my first feature weeks ever. I was 17.
I don't know. It's like a compliment to me, and what the fuck were you thinking?
It would have been featuring for anyone. I would have canceled it. So,
really,
but
you could have had.
You
sex.
could have just left.
You decided
there.
In the long run.
I couldn't have had sex. I couldn't have had sex. It wasn't going to happen. It was more of a friend date. So, and she had a backup, so I didn't feel it wasn't pure cattery, but Jake was absolutely one of the guys that when he came to town, every comic came to the club to watch him, and everyone was excited, and he was one of the of that era. Jake was really always one of the comics that everyone thought, this guy is creative, this guy is doing his own thing.
And so in that spirit, you're saying you remember this set.
I remember
that's what I thought
watching that set.
Yeah,
you know?
Okay, break it up, you guys.
I want us, because you mentioned the stammery thing, that they were worried, at least that's what they communicated to you, might be misinterpreted as nervousness. It's brilliant. And pardon me for paying you a compliment here. I'm really not just trying to lavish praise, but I want to...
No, it's getting a little weird.
Well, but here's the deal. You had to decide that I'm going to do this nervous character thing. Like, that's
well, no,
a choice.
you don't have to decide that. I didn't have to decide that.
Well,
there was not a calculated choice. I mean, it was sort of, I was nervous on stage as a stand-up, and so I kind of went with it, but I kept trying to get to what I meant to talk about. And it worked out that then I figured out, over trial, that's the way stand-up works, over trial and error. You kind of figure out where the laughs are for you and what they think is funny about what you are doing. And you become then more a little conscious of it, but it wasn't a calculated thing. It was much more organic than that.
It was almost like Jimmy Stewart in a way.
It was an expression. I'm just trying to express myself. That's all.
But it is a Jimmy Stewart halting, but you do maintain it. It's as though there's a tentative quality, and here's what that does. And I noticed it when I just watched it. No, when you're an audience member, you're watching it, you're going, this guy, and this is what I've always talked to you about, like everything you guys say seems so organic, like you're coming up with it in the moment.
Right. It keeps it conversational, definitely.
It definitely makes me feel like he's not planned this, and yet obviously this material has to be crafted.
Well, that's the trick of the trick of stand-up is that that's not the trick, but stand-up is an illusion. You're trying to make something seem spontaneous that's not spontaneous. And so in a magic show, that the guy is doing a magic trick, and your question is, how did he do it? And if someone said, he's done that 1,000,000 times, it's a trick, you'd just be like, shut up, I know that, I'm trying to watch a magic show. Right. But people come to the comedy show and go, is the second show the same as the first show? And you go, yeah, and then they act as if, well, that's bullshit, I thought you just made it all up. It's well, I hate that you're disappointed to find out that you just watched a magic show, but people love magic shows.
Yeah. Of course, you're right. It's still done effectively, and that struck me as an effective affectation. And as you say, it was just it came out of an organic thing, but it just is so effective.
Right.
But eventually it became the way you wrote jokes, I assume.
Well, right, and it's because it's the way I express myself in real life, or a version of that. And I feel like even though I've evolved and changed over the years, that's still in there. It's still part of it. I mean, when you watch Paula Poundstone, you don't think, oh, she made up this thing that she's doing. Right. That's obviously her.
But if I came on stage and I try to take charge of the stage kind of, and I said, boy, I'll tell you, life in L.A. is crazy. I don't know. The thing about New York and L.A. is, it's a setup that the thing about New York and L.A. is it sounds quite. Well, maybe I could do something with that.
I don't quite understand
what I'm saying is something seems like it would be the equivalent of a magician with a bow tie coming out with his hand.
Well, but you're going to come out and present a whole different thing. You come out, you look a different way. You have this broadcaster voice, so right away you have authority over the audience. So you're going to take charge of the room a different way than Jake does, or a different way than I do.
So you're saying every comic has their own thing?
Yeah, every comic.
Not every comic. I mean, and people are influenced by someone, or they think this guy is similar to me, and I see how he's doing it, and so I'm going to do my thing. But then, if they've just watched you, sometimes they can be more like you. But over time, everybody kind of develops their own.
A lot of people
group.
thought Ellen DeGeneres stole Jake.
Oh, because she did have the same thing. She did have a halting thing. I remember because we were all in San Francisco at the same time together.
Yeah, she was there. I've heard that. Whatever. I don't think that's true. I think she's a type. We're similar type people, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, her thing, as I recall, was big stories. She went through long story, at least on stage back then. I haven't seen her comedy. I haven't kept up with it.
And she was more driven to get out of it. I mean, she's not a person who still wants to go out and do stand-up gigs. She was really driven to she was doing that with her stand-up, which was artistic and funny and great and kind of out there, But her drive was to act and to now do what she's doing now.
Yeah, her eye was on a different prize, I think, for sure.
I mean, I think we all thought that's what we wanted to do, but she achieved that and she did it. I'm happy with how I've spent my time. We were just talking about that before this show. Yeah. Nobody's in the kitchen right now, so it's pretty nice.
In the green room, it's quiet. But that's because you don't really know. I mean, I would think when you're coming up, you guys describe this process, you're trying to get your act together, and meaning literally your act together on stage, and then you get this Tonight Show shot. I mean, that's a huge thing. And then, I would think you could plant the flag, but you need to go to the next thing, or what do you do?
What do you mean by plant the flag?
Meaning that's a mountaintop. The Tonight Show.
Well, sure, you've got that, but I mean, nobody, no matter where you are, you've always got some other thing that you want. I mean, that's, I think, that's a part of life that a lot of people don't really take on board until they have some expectations that are ruined, because they think, oh, once I get this, then I'm going to be happy, and then it's going to be all smooth sailing. It's like, no, you get the Tonight Show, and then you want to do it again, and then you want to headline this club, or you want to do that club, or you want to start doing shows in theaters, or you want to tour internationally, or you want to get your own TV show, you want a talk show, or you want a sitcom, and then once you get that, you get an acting job in a movie. Well, then you want like a bigger acting job, and then all at once you're Jim Carrey, and you're pissed off that Steve Carell gets to make the new funny movie because he's the guy who's the first choice right now. Not that that's, I don't know if that's Jim Carrey, but you know what I mean?
Right,
even the guy you get to the top of everything. Look at Robin Williams. He's making funny movies, and then he's like, I want to do a serious movie, and then he's doing serious movies. You know, and then he wants to be, and then he wants to lead or a bigger one, or he wants to be taken more seriously, or he wants to win an Academy Award. You know, whatever you're doing, there's some new goal after you achieve the one that you just achieved.
Sure.
Right. And like the Tonight Show, and that, you know, while that's a personal mountaintop for a lot of comics, it's also just, it's the thing that brings options to the table, you know. That's the thing that lets you start to
it did
choose
it did at the time. I mean, I'm not even sure what that is now, because people are getting discovered in the back of comic book stores, and, you know, there's backyard comedy shows now that I haven't done, but I think I've heard they're fun. And I've heard sometimes there's, you know, agents or casting directors at backyard comedy shows.
That makes sense. It's sort of like that underground discovery seems to be more in tune with the culture right now. You know what I mean? Looking, hey, I found this guy in a backyard comedy.
Right, but once there's a casting director or somebody from an agent at the backyard comedy show, I don't feel like that's underground. It's like, hey, come on now.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's a lot of ways to get into show business now. It's much more porous from you're a guy who's starting out to you're a guy who's got a deal. I mean, you can just start making YouTube videos in your house, and if they're great, you're going to get attention. And if you got 1 million people subscribing to your channel or watching your thing, and it's good and funny, the show business is going to come find you.
That's what I was going to say, is 1 million hits is kind of the new Tonight Show spot, you know, because there isn't a tentpole TV credit that will change your career anymore.
But then the funny thing is, like, well, so why do those guys want to do a TV show? I mean, eventually it becomes like, well, so you want to control and own my creative output, but what do I get out of it? We're going to make you famous. It's like, well, I'm already pretty famous.
Because there's not that much money in the YouTube scene anymore, unless.
Well, maybe there's not that much money in YouTube, but there's a lot of money. I disagree with there's not. I think once you get to that level, you can be making money. You can get sponsorships outside of just the money that YouTube pays you, and also you can start doing live appearances. You know, there's
but you also have your agents desperately trying to get you onto TV shows as guest stars, as I've learned.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, is that there's.
Can you get me onto a TV show?
I can't personally, but
okay,
but that is, I mean, that's something. If you're doing any kind of like cable-y show right now, you're always going to have them try to push YouTube stars down your throat.
Here's where I'm at right now. I would like to get on a TV show so that I can get more people to come to my live comedy show.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about get famous, sell tickets.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? I mean, it's like Jake Johanssen from Blankety Blank series, right? It doesn't even have to be a comedy series. Look what's her name from 24?
Marilyn Rastchuk.
Yeah, I mean, it blew up.
I just breezed through her last name like that.
Marilyn Rice Cub.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, she was at the Kilkenny Comedy Festival. I met her over there. She was over there doing that. And that was kind of more at the beginning of her stand-up thing. But she's very funny. You have to know... You have to have bought into her style. If people don't know who she is when they go and see her, it's a little tricky to. It's the thing like that I was talking about. It's like Johnny might think she's nervous, you know, or when you go to the crowd, you get like, is she doing that on purpose, or is that But it's part of her act. And then once so that's why it's great for her to be known, because then she gets people who know her coming to the show to see her, and then they love her.
Right.
You just came off the road. You were traveling internationally.
Right. Well, I was on tour with Russell Peters, the great Russell Peters, who's international. He has a giant international following, and he's super. If you speak English and you are not white, you know who he is, and plenty of white people know who he is too. But he has a giant crowd, and we would following everywhere. We would be eating lunch in Jakarta. and someone would come over and want to take a selfie with him.
Wow.
Or Oslo, Norway, wherever we were.
And he's playing like 10,000 seaters now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We did some 12. We did a few 12,000s, and then on this Europe tour, we played some smaller places in smaller cities that he had never been to, that he wanted to go to, like in Trondheim, Norway. The crowd was just about 300 people in this little kind of box. It was like in San Francisco, the Great American Music Hall. It was one of those really cool little theatery kind of rock and roll rooms.
Trondheim is this cute little place too, huh? It's a gorgeous little town.
It's at the top of Norway. Yeah. It's really, Norway is great. So, yes, I was on the road with him, but my part in that show was I was just the opener. You know, he had been a fan of mine since when he started or before he started, and I knew who he was because he's internationally famous and a comedian, and I'm really interested in that international thing. So when we met and we were talking about that, having a little mutual admiration thing, he said, I don't want to insult you, but would you want to come on the road and open for me? And I was like, yes, I would like to do that.
Wow. And
so it's been great.
How long were you away with that?
Well, the first trip was through Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, and then that was 6 weeks, and then back home for a month, and then we just were in the UK and Europe for another 6 weeks, and now I'm leaving Friday to go do a couple of shows in Canada. He has, and I'm on with him, so we have some US and UK. Or U.S. and Canada dates.
There is a Johanssen tariff now, unfortunately, for Canadians.
I don't know if you've
Yeah, I can't wait to go through the Canadian. It was already bad enough because of other nonsense that we've done to the border and Canadians. It was already bad enough. But they, because in retaliation for the stupid stuff that the U.S. does to Canadians, then when you get there, they're like, hey, I hate to bother you, but you're going to have to come over here and explain yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the story just blew up with the trash talking that was going on, essentially from the U.S. to Canada. But I was struck because Trudeau really didn't trash talk. I mean, he was quite polite. I watched the remarks 3 times. He says, I regret that the United States has decided to, and so we're not anxious to. And, he's like all that Canadian politeness, whereas we're like, there's a special place in hell for dirtbags like you, mother effer. You know what I mean?
Well, I also feel like
him in the back.
Yeah.
Trump loves to get into a sarcastic name-calling battle with people, and I think Trudeau's just saying, look, I'm not going to, this is who I am. I'm going to be myself, and that's what you want to do.
Trump also it seems, likes to go after people who are being polite and gracious and doesn't like to go after people who are trash-talking back, like Kim, for example.
Well, he's attacking people who are most on his side, Angela Merkel and the Great Britain and Canada, and then he's going to visit Kim Jong-un with no concessions, just like, we'll just hang out. It'll just be you and he. Don't worry about it. Just us.
Was it Dennis Rodman? Someone was telling me a Dennis Rodman story when he went over there, or maybe it was...
He was over for this summit.
Right, but his first trip, and this might not have been Dennis Rodman, but it was some dignitary type, high-profile person, arrives at the airport, gets in a limousine or whatever it is, transportation, and drives away from the airport there in North Korea. And in the rearview mirror, you could see the lights of the airport going off. Everything just turned off. In other words, it was just turned on for his arrival and then his transport, and then it's because electricity is a concern there. They are starved for resources, and of course, the citizens are literally starving.
Right.
Well, to be fair, I don't think we leave the lights on at LAX all night. I mean, I feel like when nobody's in there, we could turn these off, right?
Good point. Bad bust.
I mean, I don't think North Korea's got a lot of in-out traffic. That's everybody's boycotting.
There is that. Like, why leave them on? There's not another
turn
flight coming. Yeah, you're right. I reconsider that. You're absolutely right. That makes sense. So you've seen the world now in ways you haven't on this Peters show, isn't that right?
Yeah, well, yes, but it's also a lot of our itinerary was travel day, travel day, show day. So you do the show. You got to be at the venue at 4:30. Show starts at 8. And then you do the show, and it's over at 10:30 or so. And then he likes to do a meet and greet, and then we sit and have a sandwich after the show. And so you get back to the hotel, sometimes 12, more likely 1, and then you got to meet in the lobby at 3:45 a.m. to go to the airport.
That's brutal.
And then in Europe, you got to fly through somewhere. The Frankfurt airport it's not fun. We went on a shuttle, where you go to the gate and then they call you and you go through the door and you think you're in the jet bridge and you're going to get on the plane, but then there's a stairway and you go down and you get on a bus, and then the bus takes you to the plane. We were on one of those buses that I'm pretty positive was as far away from the plane as my house is from LAX. It was a good 20 minutes on the bus.
Wow.
So then you spend the day traveling, you get in at 4:00 in the afternoon, and you go to your hotel, you immediately crash, but you set an alarm for 2 hours so you can get up at 6 and walk around and see some of the city.
Sure.
And then have a nice dinner if you can, and then try and get up the next morning at 9 or 10 so that you can see a little more of the city before you have to take a shower and be at the venue again, leaving at 4, 5 o'clock. So
you learn the coffee each city has to offer.
We learn the coffee, and you learn the I'm going to just take off all my clothes, get in the bed, take a nap for 2 hours, and then when the alarm goes off, you don't want to get up because you're dead tired. But just look, if you want to see Ljubljana, Slovenia, you better get up and go out there because you're going to be gone in 36 hours.
When you get up for those to kind of get a sense of the places you visit, have you lined up a tour ahead of time?
I thought I was going to do more research, which I was not able to do. Sometimes you're staying in a part of town. Now with the map, you can go on your iPad, you can look at the map of the city where you are, and you can see things that are close. Maybe you want to go to a museum. I like the museums that were about the city or the country, just to get a little bit of the history of the place. So sometimes I did that. Towards the end of the tour, Russell had a friend show up in Berlin who had taken a bike tour, and he was telling me, all these cities have bike tours, and it's a great way to see the city because you get a little physical exercise. It's better than the bus tour, the hop-on, hop-off bus tour, which is also, well, they're not awful in the sense that if you come to a place, you're only going to be there for one day and you want to have a sense of it, you can do that. But the bike tour is like that, but you're also getting exercise and you're outside, and so you go and you stop. So he told me about that in Berlin, and we only had a couple more stops. But in Zagreb, I did take a bike tour, and I went on the internet, and I showed up at 10 just to see if there was anybody going, because you could only make a reservation if you were 2 people or more. And so I just showed up hoping someone else was on the tour, and the guy said, well, nobody else is on the tour, but I'll take you for 1.5 times the ticket. So I took a bike tour. It was just me and the guy.
Oh, that's very cool.
And that was fun. And so that was a fun way to see Zagreb. But it's also hard to do that because most of those, if you're going to do that and try and get to the show, you have to do it on the day that you have the show.
Sure.
So you have to be there at 10 to take the tour. And if it's going to be, usually they're 2.5, 3 hours.
Right.
So by the time you're done, now it's 1. By the time you get back to the hotel, it's 2. So now you just have a couple hours to take your shower or less to take your shower and get ready to go do the show. So, and you've just had a blowout day the day before, so sometimes you don't want to get up and leave the hotel by 9 to get to the place.
Use your show energy too.
Yeah, you're trying to always keep an eye on your gas tank.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of opportunity, and also it's exhausting.
Well, if I look at the pictures on my phone, I definitely saw a lot of cool stuff. So my approach was, rather than I went to a few museums in Stavanger, Norway. I went to the Petroleum Museum, which was well worth the visit, and there was a canning museum there and a fishing museum.
What's the Petroleum Museum like?
Well, Stavanger is where the petroleum industry started in Norway, where all the North Sea drilling, that some of it's based in Scotland and the UK, but a lot of it's based in Norway and their Norwegian oil fields. And that's where that oil boom started. And Norway has socialized their oil industry, so the country gets the profits, and it's turned out to be a real benefit for the country. And the first thing that they show you in the Petroleum Museum is this movie about a young guy who was separated from his dad because his dad worked on the oil rigs, who's driving an plug-in electric car now because he's got to grind on for the oil industry. So they have a real environmental aspect to their petroleum industry that's sort of refreshing and surprising.
That's cool that it's not just some big wet kiss to the petroleum industry.
No, it's not. But it's also just like, this is our resource, and this is how we're going to use it for our benefit, sure. And this is how we're trying to protect the planet against the downside of this, and how we're trying to use our money to put research in to get more sustainable energy for the future.
Sure.
So so it was interesting. So sometimes I would do those museum things, but But a lot of times I would just walk around and see things.
Yeah, I would think also, as J.Elvis says, you might just be, I just need to walk for an hour instead of like hustling.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to walk around and get fresh air. And a lot of times we were staying in the part of the city where you can walk around. You can see old buildings. Or in Berlin, there was great walking from our hotel, but then I took a cab to. I can't remember what they call it, but it's a section of the Berlin Wall where they left it standing. And on the former East Berlin side, artists, I don't know what the process is to get certified to be the person who gets to paint on this chunk of the wall, but it's about almost a mile-long section of wall where, every 50 feet there's another art project going on, and that's something to see.
And there's another thing in Berlin at the wall, of course, that Checkpoint Charlie, as they call it, they've got it sort of set up so you can
there's a photo op,
bunch of photo ops of people dressed in the East German military garb, but there's a museum there, and the stories, and also at the wall you just read the stories. It's a real day there at the wall, and you can read about how oppressive. We forget in the German history, I think, or at least I forget, maybe so focused on the Holocaust and the horrors associated with the Holocaust, that this communist regime that ruled East Germany, it was awful, and people did so many things and were so inventive and desperate to get out. And a lot of what happened both in East Germany and also what happened to get out and get through that area of Berlin, that's chronicled there as well. I just remembered it as you were saying it. Let's take a small break, and then we'll come back and we'll do the next half hour. Is that cool?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
Right before we took our break, I just said to Mark, it's great. You've got Jake here, you got Josh here, and yet you tell some story about how horrible it was living under East German communism. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, really way to bring the audience up.
Do you have any Anne Frank stories that you want to tell?
I do want to tell you that our guest, Jake Johanssen, Josh, rode his bike here. Wow. The first guest to ride his bike here.
But not all the way. I rode it to the bottom of the hill, which is a massive hill. Of course, everyone needs to know you live on a mountaintop here. You've got a mountaintop fortress.
Right. But no one's even ridden to the bottom of the hill before.
It's further than I thought from my house. I mean, it took me a little longer than I had budgeted.
You were motivated by the fact that you have one car now.
You're
down to one car.
We went down to one car, and my wife has a job. She didn't have a job. She was between jobs, let's put it that way, for a while. And so then it was easier to share the car. But now she's going to work. She gets the car.
Jake is married to a very beautiful, smart, lovely, and socially conscious, meaning aware of the planet and effect on the planet type person. She's really great. I really am a fan.
I made a good choice. I feel like I made a good choice. Yeah. But, you have a wife.
I do.
They're problematic.
Why is that?
Well, it's just because they're another person. It's another person that you have to deal with. And when you fall in love, you don't realize that they're going to want different things than you sometimes. And so you have to figure out a way for them to have the things that they want and you to have the things that you want, and how much time you're going to spend together, all that.
Now, when there's a choice between giving them the things they want and the things that you want, do you have to go always with what they want?
No, you shut down parts of yourself like a North Korean airport.
Yeah, well, you can you can hypnotize yourself into you want the things that they want. Like, let's just try. My first response a lot of times is no. No matter what she's asking for, I just say no. Right. And then I end up having to change my mind, and I realize, maybe I should pause for a second before I say no and see. Now I'm trying to get to my default thing. Is maybe let's see.
Oh, I see. And the no thing, the no default was born of, this is just a good negotiating posture to always have.
No, just I was a reflexive dumbass from before, and I'm trying to be a better person now.
Wow. I mean, are you serious? Do you think that you were because your marriage has gone on a long time?
I think if you're a comic, though, every idea is dumb on its face. And you have to sort of...
Other people's ideas are dumb, and then most of your ideas, You're right. You rule out a lot of your own ideas even.
I explain it as I really sort of envision it this way, is I have two voices in my head at all times. There's a comedic voice and there's a human voice. And the comedic voice is way faster than the human voice and how it responds. So part of being married for me is pressing mute on the comedic voice. And sometimes my wife will say something and I will literally just leave silence there because I'm like, nope, first answer's no good, second answer's no good, then the human voice kicks in for the third answer, and that's when I finally speak. But that's the skill that I've learned as a married man is, you know, she might like your mind, but she doesn't like everything in it. You know, she doesn't.
Yeah.
You know?
And also as a comedian, our training is if someone else says something, this is a problem and you need to shut it down. And I just listening to what you just said, it made me kind of think like maybe there is some of that, like your impulse is to respond immediately. That's, I guess, a human thing, but your impulse is to respond immediately to something that someone else says. And often the best thing to do is to just look at them for a little while.
Not everything deserves an equal and opposite reaction in a marriage.
Yeah. And just looking at them is a good response a lot of times. Just look at them. Try and smile a little bit.
Right.
I find being quiet in response, that is to say, even taking a beat or two, is hard.
It's super hard, but it freaks the other person out because no one ever does it.
So Jake's family, though, is like those sustainability issues do come up in your house, which I kind of like.
Yeah, we're big on the recycling. I keep telling my wife that you can't just put everything in the recycling bin, but she took some class when she was getting her degree that said you need to challenge the recycling center. So you just put all the plastic in there, even if they say they don't recycle, you put it in there and go, here, just look how much of this there is. You should recycle this too. And I keep telling her, no, that's just stuff that they have to take out to get to the stuff that they actually want.
I would agree with you.
When you said that's right, I mean, that's music to my ears. But
I think it's right. Well, you know,
I'm pretty sure it's right. I mean, I've stopped saying that to her because I know that she's heard it. I know it's one of my greatest hits. She doesn't want to hear Satisfaction anymore when she comes to my show. She doesn't want to hear that they would prefer that you didn't put that in the recycling.
Play Bridges to Babylon.
Does she come to your show? Does your family, or they just
They came to we did a show with this Russell Peters tour. That's still part of the same podcast.
Right.
That we talked about.
Right. Yeah.
He had a gig in Wembley in London.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah.
Wembley,
yeah. It was
wow.
12,000 people. So my wife and daughter flew over and they came to the show, and it was a great show. Someone tried to heckle, not really heckle, but some guy hollered some nonsense, and I dealt with him. And to have a whole to deal with a heckler and to have a whole arena just go laugh at the guy, and he has to shut up. It was like my wife wanted to have sex with me after the show, and my daughter was so excited that I was her dad after the show. It was really great. But she doesn't come to all the shows. She's seen enough shows. I mean, nobody wants to come see you. They'll come and see you watch the same.
They'll come
do
to
the
the
same
glory
material.
gigs. I did the Will Turn opening for Segura this past year, so Allison came to that.
Sure.
Yeah, they like to come to that, and she'll come to one of my regular. Like I usually do that show at Thanksgiving time at the Improv here in L.A. the Saturday after Thanksgiving, which hopefully I'm going to do this year. She likes to come to that because we'll invite our friends in town. And
sure, it's a social event.
And if I'm doing a show in Mill Valley, she would have come up for that and hung out with friends. But she likes to watch the show. She watches the audience watch the show a lot of times.
But you never were at a point where you were, well, I was going to...
This sounds like I'm not going to like it when you finish this.
No, I'm asking whether when you're married, whether you're at ever a point as a comic where you go, hey, what do you think of this? Blah, 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 blah. And it's some piece of material that you're bouncing off of your wife. Neither one of you guys does that.
I don't really do that, no.
No.
But you do.
I know whether or not I think it's funny, and then there's not really a point in asking another person unless it's like borderline racist or sexist or some kind of, you're about to make some jujitsu point that you're worried that if you say this, people will take it wrong and it won't work. Maybe I might ask another comic about something like that. But most of the time, like, look, I think this is funny. I'm just going to tell it to a crowd. It's not like every joke is precious. I mean, if you come to see an hour comedy show, you may see a couple of things that you don't think are as funny, but hey, that's just conversationally, it's worked into the act,
But it's also like 30, I assume you're like 35 years in now, right?
Yeah.
And I'm 31 years in or whatever it is. It's like, at a certain point,
you don't need to
it's
ask
like,
anymore.
I've got an 80% 85% certainty that anything that I've decided is stage worthy is going to work, you know?
It's going to work, or it's not going to be such a thud that it's
Right.
terrible.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
may not work
you may not
as
get a
well
giant
in
laugh, but they
comparison.
might go,
Yeah. Right, yeah. You're very rarely you're going to go, I was 100% wrong about that. You know?
Well, or have a response where I thought it was a joke, but they all want their money back.
Right. You did television and film. I mean, you're still doing that, I presume. I just know of a couple of projects that you were involved in. So you had that, and have had that through your career, where you're performing as a comedian and also as a
Well, look, yeah, I was
actor.
developing a sitcom for me at the same time that Jerry was developing Seinfeld. I mean, if you Google me on the internet, you get this story about me turning down the role of George, which is Jerry and I were developing shows at the same time. And we were seeing each other every day at the Castle Rock offices. And one day my manager calls me and says, hey, you know, Jerry thinks you're really funny and is interested in you for part in a sitcom. And I said, well, I'd love to do that. Do I still get to do my show and be in his show? And my manager said, no, you'd have to choose between the two. And so I said, well, I mean, I love Jerry and I would love to be on his show, but I want to see what happens with my show, which turned out in retrospect to not be, although
It was still the right choice as far as I'm
well,
concerned.
I think everybody's going to make that choice to bet on themselves. And let's face it, me in Seinfeld instead of Jason Alexander or whoever else would have been a completely different show. So I think Jerry should be a little more grateful that I didn't fuck his show up. But so, yeah, I had that dream. I had that dream that time, and I had a couple other opportunities where it was going to be a show for me. And one time it was after Seinfeld ended, a couple of producers, Alec Berg and Jeff Schaffer, they were a team at the time, and Alec now is a producer of Silicon Valley, you know. But that show was at NBC. It was kind of the wrong political environment. We had the same executive that was on Seinfeld, but he wasn't really one of the sitcom development execs. He was in charge of specials. That was the tricky part about how Jerry's show got in there. And there was a little bit of animosity between the actual sitcom producers and him, and there was other dynamics at the network. And
don't you hate that? It's got nothing to do with quality of the show.
So the success of all these things, it has to be a good show, or it wants to be a good show. So the show has to have its own quality, and then all the internal dynamics. The network has to have a spot for that type of a show, and the executives have to like it. And then if you test it or whatever they do to decide if they're going to do it, that all has to happen. Nobody's got to be pissed off at anybody on the show and have an axe to grind. And so I just I didn't have all those elements. Sometimes the show was good, but there was some political thing weird. Sometimes the politics were okay, but the show was not so great, or you know.
Yeah, the stuff just has to line up. So much stuff has to line up. It really is amazing.
Mm.
But the truth of it is even if it got picked up and went 3 years, you'd probably be here doing
I would still be
stand-up.
doing
yeah.
what I mean, there was a period after some of those disappointments where I'd see people at the Improv, comedy club in L.A., and they'd be like, "What's going on with you?" And I go, "I'm going to Houston next week or whatever." And they'd be, "Oh, that's nice," because they're doing a guest spot on a TV show or something. But then a few years after that, there was a thing where they'd go, "Where are you going? What's going on with you?" And I'd say, "I'm going to the Improv next week in Houston." And they'd be like, "How do you get?
Who books that?"
And then so I would always tell people, look, all those TV shows are great, but in live stand-up, you produce it, you write it, you produce it, you perform it, you edit it on the fly, you can change it, you have immediate audience feedback, the scoreboard of it, and they hand you the money right after the show. As great as any sitcom is, nobody hands you $20 when they walk in to watch it. And so there's a lot of rewards to doing stand-up, and it's great. And it always kind of felt like, yes, it's true. I'm saying it because it's true, but it sounds to the people you're saying it to as if it's a rationalization for the fact that you didn't get the other thing. Until Jerry does a show for 11 years and then makes a movie Comedian about getting back doing stand-up and is now doing stand-up comedy gigs. Now, do you think he needs the money? Do you think he's doing that because it's a crappy job, or do you think he's doing it because it's really a good job?
Right.
Well, he has almost a eugenic take on stand-ups, I think Seinfeld does. That it's literally like the highest form of life is a comedian.
Yeah, well, he and I, our approach to stand-up is different in our way of looking at it, but I would say our affection for it.
Absolutely.
Is the same.
And I share that, too, just at a much lower level.
Yeah, there's we talked about this before we went on. There's something in stand-up which is, I was saying this to Jake before we went on. There's something in stand-up that seems so, and live performance particularly, that just seems like a special kind of satisfaction or high. I'll use that. I mean,
well, live entertainment is better than watching televised entertainment. Even when you're watching a televised live show, you're watching. What you're really doing is watching someone watch it.
That's how I see it.
You know, it's as I said beforehand, it's like the difference between watching porn or having sex with a person. You know, they're both, you're going to have the same result, but one is really better. And people don't believe that, but if they just hear me say it, but I've had so many people come up to me at comedy shows go, wow, we saw your Netflix special, or we saw you on HBO or Showtime, and that was great, but this was really at another level. And that's because it's happening to you. When you're in the room, you're connected, you're involved in the experience in a way that's just not the same. And everybody knows that when they go see a band. I mean, if you go see live music, it's if it's a band that you love, it's better than listening to their recordings. I mean, their recordings are great, but to go see them live, oh my God, we're in the room. That's the guy, he's doing the thing. And the same is true for stand-up. But I think people, for some reason, because it's talking or something, they don't. That's a surprise to them.
Yeah, it's rare in this world, rarer and rarer because of the internet and people sort of having simulated moments with each other, that you have moments with people, and something that happens live in a room and an exchange between people can only happen live in a room and be a real moment. And I think people are sort of starved, like they don't know how starved they are for that.
Well, the whole
right
current
now.
comedy scene, the reason backyard shows are popular and all these alternative venues are popular is because there are some people who realize, I want to have a personal experience of this. I want to make it small enough where I want to get that experience. So I think it's having a little bit of a renaissance, but what you're saying is true. I mean, so many people feel like they can just sit home or watch YouTube or things on their phone. I mean, I've seen it's not just keeping people from going out, it's keeping people who went out from interacting with each other.
Right.
How often do you look around the restaurant and see two people at a table and they're both looking at their phones, or four people at a table and they're all looking at their phones? And if you're the third person out of four who's not looking at their phone and everybody else is looking at their phone, it's a losing battle to try and pull one of them out of the pit.
Right.
You might as well jump in too.
And I notice it, like, even in green rooms doing stand-up, that green rooms used to be a conversational thing.
Yeah, no, now
it's three people on their phone.
And sometimes they're just looking at things, but sometimes they're on their phone telling other people about the experience that they're having, but they're not even having the experience.
Right.
The reality
their
is
typing.
Hey, I'm backstage at the Hollywood Bowl. And it's like, no, you're not. You spent the whole fucking time on your phone. It's like people who are at a live show holding up their phone to make a video of the show. Now instead of you being at the show, you're watching the phone version of the show instead of the actual show. And not only are you watching it, the guy behind you has also got to look past your stupid phone to see the show. I've seen a couple fights almost start out.
And the moment I was just talking about now becomes telling people that you're at a show instead of being at the show.
No, and I'm guilty as charged. If I'm at a big music show, whatever, I've got to get. It's like I just don't want this moment to end. But as you say, what moment, Mark? The moment where you're holding a phone in front of your face, and you're not enjoying the show in a kind of pure way.
I both regret, but more I'm proud when I look back at my life in show business and like how few photos I have of it because I was living it at the time and not worried about getting a shot of it.
Well, and I was never the guy who was meeting somebody and saying, hey, can we get a photo?
Yeah, me either.
But then you go to somebody's house and they got a wall full of those photos and you're like, fuck, think about all the photos I could have had.
It's the mix of regret, but I'm more proud of it.
There's a little bit of mix, but the price in the moment of getting that photo is the destruction of what's going on. It's like, look, now this is just a documentation of a thing that's not really happening.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, there are times and ways to ask that don't necessarily disturb the vibe the way you're suggesting, but it's hard, and it has to be the right moment. Otherwise, it just ends up, you're going, I don't care about the vibe. I need a picture with whomever.
Right. We'll be right back with old guy talk.
Well, no, I tell you, I was at a vegan restaurant the other night. I mentioned it because it was quite a collection of stars, and I want people to know that there are high-profile celebrities who attend these vegan restaurants occasionally.
But I just want to make this point. You don't have to be vegan to go to a vegan restaurant.
No, you do not. And then probably
But you do have to be a celebrity, which is weird.
Well, this is, I don't know, I'm always trying to, advance the cause of, the vegan eating. But anyway, there's a room there, and it's like just a short distance from where I'm sitting. And I see a bunch of people in there, but I can't really tell. I don't really look. And then the host comes over and says, so glad to see you, blah, blah, blah. It's been a busy night. He said, you don't want to go over and say hi to Warren Beatty, Al Pacino, Albert Brooks, and one other. He could have just said Albert Brooks for me, and I would have been, it's game over.
You don't want to go over and say hi to them. No, I don't.
Well, no, he knew I wasn't going to, and I didn't, of course. But he was just sort of saying that I'm excited that these people are all eating. I'm trying to remember. There was one other. But anyway, the point is, but I was almost doubled over in pain, wanting to and knowing I'm not going to go over and say, Albert Brooks, oh, my God, blah, 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 blah. But, of course, I never would do it.
My rule of thumb is this. If I'm the only one who's going to remember the interchange, I don't want to have it.
Yeah. Well, he'll probably remember it, but he'll remember it as an uncomfortable moment in his life and not the positive, incredible moment that I will have. But,
nice to meet you, Mark. It's a delight to meet you.
Well,
if you had a fart ready or something like that, you could get over there and do something ridiculous.
That makes it a story.
Well, so here's the thing. First of all, I'd met him before, and just to run this out because I started it, I'd met him before, and he said, oh, no, I know who you are, Mark. Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. He was very, very nice. We had just a brief interchange. We even had an interchange on Twitter. But I, in my head, said, okay, Mark, let's say you go over there. You decide that you're not worried about being that guy, even though we know you are worried about it. But let's just say you're not. You go over there. You say, hi, great to see you. What do you expect will happen next? Is it a drive-by hello? I mean, he's certainly not going to say, Al Pacino, and you don't want him to say it. You don't want to disturb the whole dinner just to go,
Right.
It was a weird spot.
What do you want?
You want to say hello to him.
You wanted the photo.
No, that's what I was talking about. Oh, yeah. And then but I'm not going to take the photo, so you're not going to get that.
But the whole point of the photo is to prove to someone that you got close enough to, it's like some weird scavenger hunt game that you're playing with the universe. Like, look, this is me when I got close to Albert Brooks and touched him.
I agree. It's totally effed up.
On the other hand, if people recognize me, it's not happening enough that it's a problem. I'm happy to do it. And Russell on tour he could get swamped with people, but anytime somebody comes over and asks for a selfie, he's happy to do it. So some people, but you got a guy like Albert Brooks. He's been so well known and so accomplished with so many projects for so long that it's like you're not really. He knows that you love his work.
Sure.
Right. How dead inside would he have to be like, fuck, thank you. Today was a rough day.
Mark Thompson really rescued me from my doldrums today. But I will say this, having also taken pictures with people who wanted them, there is a happiness there that's cool. Now, that's probably because I'm not besieged by people all the time. I'm not. I feel like I'm a party to that happiness, and I'm glad.
Oh, and when I'm in a Mystery Science Theater context, which is the only time people will ask me for that kind of thing, absolutely thrilled to give it to them. If they're going to take something from it, then that's great.
Well, if it's defined and in a limited area, but those guys each on their own are probably it's like going to the beach and being the seagulls just go ape shit as soon as you open your food up. Right. But that's what it's like every time they leave their house. So with them, It's got to be different. Well, what you could do is you could walk over and go, hey, you guys, I don't want to bother you, but everybody, it's Albert Brooks.
There's another vegan restaurant in Venice.
Well, and you're like a vegan mucky muck.
What's it called?
And it's called Plant Food and Wine. And Benedict Cumberbatch was there the other night, sitting right...
Oh, my foot. Oh, just that name just dropped right on.
Right behind my girlfriend. She's huge. She'd just seen Avengers or whatever the hell it was. Is it Avengers? Or
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange and Avengers. He's in both of it. But she would not turn... even though she knew he was there, she would not turn around and, she didn't want to be that person either.
I hate being that... And I if I see someone... Like I've had a couple times where I've been in a restaurant with Steve Martin before. I don't know why he sticks out, because he sticks out to me because he is the most uncomfortable person I've ever witnessed. I think.
Let me just ask: was it a vegan restaurant, or
it was not a vegan restaurant?
Okay, just checking.
He could have still been having a vegan meal, though.
Thank you.
And there was once where he was with people where he was much more comfortable. And there was once where he was alone in this restaurant, and I could not stop looking at Steve Martin eating alone in a restaurant. Because it was almost like watching a movie to me. But I felt terrible at the same time, like invading his privacy, watching him. But he was so uncomfortable because everyone in the restaurant was kind of looking at Steve Martin eating.
And he has to pretend that he doesn't know that.
Yeah, it was just there were so many levels to this of anxiety and awareness and self-awareness and
people think it's amazing how many people think they want to be famous, and then how unpleasant being famous really. The reality of it is it's not fun. I think even people who are kind of enjoying it will say, look, it's you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything.
Yeah, it has evaporated from my wish list over time.
Let me just argue the other point for a second. You can't go anywhere, and you can go everywhere. It gives you access to everything on a level that you just don't have if you're a regular person. Even a rich person, sometimes, although increasingly rich will get it done, but...
well, if you're rich, you can just pay to do everything. But if you're famous, a lot of times you can go, is it free? And they're like, yeah, it's free.
Right.
I mean, you have to say how much does it cost, and they go, no, it just doesn't cost you anything.
Well, the other thing you have to factor in is that there's a lot of people who are giant celebrities are also giant narcissists, and they do like the attention.
Well, you don't get famous by accident. I mean, you're not. I mean, it's maybe sports figures is a different story because they're doing a thing that they love, and then they're tangentially getting famous, and I can see how it would piss them off that they have to deal with being famous. But if you're an actor or a comedian or a singer, it's like, look, you're trying to get famous.
Yes, it is a pretension to act as if you don't want to be famous.
Right. So then once it happens, I can get how it wasn't what you wanted, but you can't deny it, or that you're not liking it. But you can't deny that you wanted this. This is what you wanted.
Victimhood isn't the right pose at that point.
I think the society also is really set up to so favor people who have fame that it's really hard to argue that it's such a drag. Even those athletes, there's limitless companionship everywhere you want it. They are indulged beyond any reasonable indulgence.
Although it's not, you constantly have to question the motives of everyone around you when you become that famous, because they all want something. And even if you don't make them behave a certain way, they're going to constantly be trying to not upset you because they want to keep being in that, they want to keep hanging out with you, go to the places you're going and eating a steak or whatever they're getting from you. And that doesn't have to be something that you're pushing down on them. It's just the nature of being famous that you got to now, everybody around you is there for a different reason. You got to decide, do they really like me or not? Whereas Josh and I, we know that people like us because we're doing shit that pisses them off. Maybe not you, but I'm doing questionable things that are just me all the time.
Of course, what you've just said is true, but what I would say is that most people want to be surrounded by yes people. They just do. And so
you're so right, Mark.
No, when you say that you got to figure out who's your real friend and who's not. My real friends are the ones who are always saying, right on, I mean, I think there's more scrutiny coming out of perhaps the three of us than would come out of many of these celebrity situations.
But here's the other wrinkle in modern fame. If you are famous, there are hundreds to thousands of people talking such shit about you constantly now that you can see online if you're interested. You can be as much adulation as you can be bombarded with in a day. You can be bombarded with such hatred and vitriol in a way, and see it.
No, that's true.
In a way that wasn't true 10 years ago.
I can't tell you how long I've waited to say this. Haters gonna hate.
Let me say, you stuck the landing on that. I know.
Thank you. I didn't feel like I did it very good. I don't necessarily think that everybody wants to be surrounded by yes men or women.
Well, yes men, we mean generically.
Maybe you think that's what you want, but the side effect of that is you start behaving in ways where you don't realize you're an asshole anymore because you're surrounded by people who put up with it.
Right.
Yeah, well, we've all seen movies where it's, written, directed, and stars whomever, and you go, wow, this needed somebody to say, hey, Act 2 needs to be reworked. I mean, it's after you rework Act 1. I mean, in the arts and I think in celebrity, you can get drunk on the yes, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, it is very easy to believe that because you are famous, you are right.
When we're finishing up here, but when you're out on, when you're
okay, all right,
you're finishing up.
Yeah,
I'm going to cut out all that last shit.
It didn't feel like we were finishing up, but now that you say that, I get it. We're going to finish up. I thought for a while it seemed like it was just three guys enjoying each other's company.
In the middle of it, actually.
And then it was like, nope, this is actually a thing that's other people. That's not us.
He's thinking of his terrifying bike ride down your road.
Yeah, I wasn't, but now I am.
It's pretty cool going downhill. When you're out on stage, what's your sense of the audience, even if you don't? I don't think you do real political stuff.
I don't. I have a few. Well, it's been a while since I've been doing my show, right?
So you've been doing the opening.
Yeah, I got on board with Russell's tour at the beginning of this year. So it's almost 6 months of me opening for him.
Does he do political stuff?
He does a little bit. But we're outside the United States also, and I'm only doing 20 minutes. And my job is to get them warmed up and to not get in a situation that 20 minutes is not time to get out of a situation. You don't want to get into anything that you have to get out of, and you especially don't want to like, hey, that was a big turd. The stage still smells. Enjoy Russell.
Does your
I've hired Al Jaffe to draw a squiggly line over my set.
Does the audience, they're there to see Russell, but they're excited to see you as well?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. They are. But what were you going to ask about politics? Because I did have some experience while our current president was president. Were you just going to say what's the response to him? I'm guessing now. This is like a game show that I'm playing.
And you're the
winner.
The game
because
that's exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah. So what is the response when you bring up politics? Because I've heard something, and I don't think it's true. Tell me whether it's, and that is, well, I don't bring up politics because I know immediately if I mention something, I'm going to lose half the crowd. I'm thinking, I don't think you're going to lose half the crowd.
You can lose a palpable percentage of the crowd these days.
It just everything can turn into an argument. I mean, we're so trained now, like we were talking earlier about social justice and race and women's feminism and the Me Too thing and LGBTQ. I don't know if I did that right. There might have been one that I forgot.
Very good one.
But everybody wants to be a cop. So that's the thing that's going on now. Everybody wants to be a cop. And the other thing is any kind of thing that's political, people are so used to the way it's presented on television, on CNN, on Fox, on MSNBC. It's always an argument. It's always this person thinks this and this person thinks that. They don't listen to each other, but they both yell the thing that they think, and they act like the other guy's an idiot. Right. And that we're not talking about trying to solve the same problem. Like, hey, we've got some people that came into this country that are innocent of everything. They're children, and their parents snuck in, but now they're citizens. So how do we solve that problem? Nobody wants to actually talk about like, oh, this is how I think we should talk. They all want to talk about, I think he's an idiot, and I have this opinion, and I think he's an idiot because I have that opinion. And so if you bring something like that up on stage, you can wind up in an unintentional argument. So if you want to do a political show, I mean, first of all, if you want to do political material, I think you want to do something that both sides can laugh at, so even if you're making fun of some side's point of view, you want the people who hold that point of view to think, oh, that's funny. I hadn't thought about that part of it. That's funny. Because otherwise you're just cheerleading. Otherwise you're trying to say, look, if you disagree with me, you came to the wrong place because I'm only talking to them. And you don't want to split the room like that or divide. My agenda is you came out, we're going to have a good time. So I'm trying to do jokes that everybody can laugh at. So if I'm doing political stuff, it's political stuff that no matter what your opinion is, I hope that you'll find that it's funny. And if people do, sometimes people do get mad because there is that knee-jerk thing, like you just made fun of my guy. I'm like, hey, look, I don't want to start an argument. I just thought that particular part of it is funny. You keep voting, keep doing what you do, and we'll keep doing what we do. But right now, let me tell you a little story about my wife.
And I found that you can if you filter it through yourself instead of these people or those people think, like I ended up doing a fairly good chunk of gun control stuff, but it was all about what would happen if I bought a gun. It was all through that lens of, a lot of shit has to go right in order for it to be worth it for me to have bought a gun,
Right.
And so, and I didn't even really think of it as subversive,
Sure.
But someone was going, I can't believe, because I was in Minnesota or whatever, I can't believe you got away with doing all that gun control shit. And I'm like, well, I guess it was because I snuck it in the back door.
It feels so real, like what's going on. But then again, that's sort of my orientation. So when you say something political or whatever, like I'm anxious to hear it regardless of the of the you, and regardless of the forum.
Well, but I don't want to turn the show into an argument. So if it's too much about my opinion, then people who hold the contrary opinion feel like, well, who says my thing? And so then you're preaching to the choir.
Sure,
so,
you're right. You're right.
And otherwise, you're doing a little bit of a debate. But, I had a gun thing where I just said, I don't think you should own a gun. I say, we don't have a gun. We don't own a gun at our house. And prior to that, I've been talking about my wife and I say, I don't think you should own a gun if you know who you would shoot with the gun. Right. Because that's the bottom line of like, look, you shouldn't, if you want to have a gun for protection, it's against some kind of nameless adversary. If you've got some person in mind who you're going to shoot, the gun is not for you. It's not a good idea. Even if that person is yourself. Even if that person is yourself, you shouldn't own a gun.
That was kind of my premise too. It was similar to that, which is like, if you're buying a gun, there is a fantasy of using that gun attached. It might be shooting a bear, it might be shooting a guy, but you are fantasizing about some use of that gun in your head.
Yeah, and that's the real question. Who are you going to shoot? Who are you going to shoot with that gun? And you really? What's it going to be like after you've shot that person with the gun? Is it going to be? Do you think there's going to be a parade? Because there's not. The cops are going to show up. There's going to be a lot of questions. You might have to spend some time in jail. You might have to pay for some lawyers. Maybe you shoot the person and you don't kill them, but they shoot you back, and now they kill you. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Let's not forget, if you're thinking about buying a gun, a lot of things could go wrong. Right. I just want to put that out there.
If we leave with no other message.
You used to do, I remember, and until this moment, I don't remember it, but you did on the Tonight Show a gun bit, and you know the joke I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I feel like now it's been ripped off by a million
NRA
comics.
says it's not the guns that kill people, and I go, they're right. It's the bullets. The guns just make them go really fast. Like, you can't imagine a guy robbing a liquor store with just a handful of bullets. Like, give me all the money, or I'm going to push these into your brain one at a time. And I did that joke at Ford Theater, where Lincoln was shot, in front of the President of the United States and Tip O'Neill and Ted Turner. It was a gala thing that they did every year. Yeah, and not just the Tonight Show. That was back in the day where you could do a joke 2 times on TV.
Oh, that's cool, and that joke did well. Obviously, you did
well because it's sort of a silly thing.
It's very yeah.
And that's where that stammering thing really softens it, too.
Well, look, my whole premise of my show is like, look, I'm an idiot. We're all here to have a good time. If you want to argue with me, look what you're doing. We're in a comedy club. This is a happy place. I didn't come here to argue. I came here for us to have a happy time and laugh tonight. If you want to fight somebody, that's a UFC kind of gym that you want to go to.
Right. That's a good point. All right, well, I feel like we have to wrap up. I know you guys have to get on with your day.
And the housekeeper's anxious to get into the kitchen.
She's got to get back to... no, she's gone. She's going to come back much later, she said.
Oh, she left?
Yeah.
You shamed her.
We had a cleaning crew here.
It was a crew. You have a SWAT team that shows up. It's like 3 of them.
But they swatted at the wrong time. They normally come late afternoon or early evening. Today they came, of course, right as we were beginning.
Yeah, I got a lady that comes to my house with a phone and a ShamWow, and that's it. She does the whole thing.
Well, you're probably getting a better deal than I am. It's really cool hanging out. I feel like I don't want to let you go, but I should mention you have a podcast if people want to hear more of your musings. And it's actually really cool. You do something I have trouble with. Josh, I have trouble just sitting here talking. You'd think as a broadcaster, a broadcast background, like just talking to the audience would be something easy for. I'm more comfortable in an interchange with somebody. Jake, I've listened to your podcast. You're very comfortable just speaking. And
sometimes it's just me talking.
Yeah, and I think your sensibility and your take on things is really strong. I really like it, so I recommend it.
Well, that's very sweet of you to say, because always when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, does anyone listen to this or like it? Why am I doing this? And mostly it's because, look, I'm busy. No one could come over.
Well, you got like a little sidekick guy who comes by.
Nigel comes by, but Nigel now, he's a comic from Canada, a very funny guy, and he lives close to me in Santa Monica, but he's back in Canada now. So when he's in Canada or on tour, it's just me. And so often I'll have a guy. The episode is going to come out, I think, tomorrow. Does this come out today?
No, it'll be a couple
Well,
days.
the answer is yes. It always does. It always comes out today. Whatever day it comes out is today.
Yeah,
but it's not the
So
day
ask me
that we're.
again,
It's
ask me
not.
again.
Does this come out today?
Yeah, today.
My episode, the episode that I'm talking about, the guest is Chris Ryan, who is the guy who wrote Sex at Dawn.
Wow, that's very strong. How did you manage that?
Well, I'm friends with him now, so that worked out for me. I heard him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and then I knew when he lived in Portland, I knew he lived there, and we had a mutual acquaintance. So I reached out to that guy to invite him to the show, and he came, and then we hit it off.
I do want to put one trivia fact out there. I teased it at the beginning of the show. In my movie, I Need You to Kill, Tom Segura, one of the stars of the movie, early in the movie talks about how his agent called him up to go on this tour of Asia and says, they're doing this tour of Asia. You're not their first choice, but would you like to do it? And Tom tells his agent, well, you didn't really need to tell me I wasn't their first choice, but yeah, I'll do it. But it turns out that the first choice who turned it down was Jake Johanssen.
And the only reason I turned it down was that I had some other responsibilities during that time, I had some. No, I really wanted to go, but I just couldn't get away for that period of time during that window that they had to go.
Yeah,
because I wanted to do it. I mean, are you kidding me? And also, I've never met Tom Segura, but I'm a fan.
Yeah, I am
so
too.
If you could introduce me to Tom,
he opened for Russell for a long time too.
Well, maybe Russell can introduce me to him. Then I see you're trying to bow out of this role.
I can also see how
you're trying to get Dave Chappelle. I got a shot at Tom Segura on my podcast.
I thought you were trying to get Segura ahead of us. No, we're going to have Segura.
I'll hook you up.
Yeah, you can. Well, me and his wife follow each other, so I could reach out to her. Maybe I can get on their podcast.
She's super funny too.
Yes, you agree.
It's wild that you have a tie to this. So you have to see the movie then, Jake.
I don't have to, but I want to.
You should.
Yeah,
I really want you to.
I want to. It's my desire. How does somebody see You Need to Kill?
Well, you could see it. It's streaming on Amazon Prime.
I have Amazon Prime, but even if you don't have Amazon Prime, you know what you can do?
You can buy it on Amazon.
Buy it.
You can buy it on iTunes or Google Play.
What's it cost to buy it?
You can buy it it's like $10 or $11. You can rent it for $3 or $4.
Yeah, just rent it.
I always go for the rental.
Yeah, because you can rent it twice. You can rent it twice and still be ahead of the game.
Yeah, I like to buy if it's like Doctor Strange. It's like, look, I'm going to buy that because just because Benedict Cumberbatch is so hot. Am I right?
Yeah, well, you can see him at the right restaurant.
Yummy. So my podcast is called the Jake This Podcast, and Josh also has a podcast.
I do, with Andy Kindler. It's called Thought Spiral.
It's really good.
And
most of the time.
What's the name of this podcast?
This is called The Edge with Mark
Edge.
Thompson. And I don't need to tell you that that's a bad name for a podcast because
it doesn't have my name in it.
It's great if you're going to be angry and talk about things that are going to piss people off.
Or edgy in any way, which I'm not particularly.
Well,
but it had a gambling connotation. Is that correct?
It did originally. It was supposed to give you an edge on gambling, and then it was supposed to give you an edge on consumer stuff like travel or whatever. But we never did those shows. And then the guy who came up with the idea to do the edge on gambling, he just vanished. So I'm left with the show. You've got the website and other stuff, and you've got a webmaster who's set up a page for you. And so I just said, well, hell, we'll just call it The Edge.
Well, you've made all the right moves to put yourself in the position to have to do an episode where you're all by yourself, because that's what happens is you set it up with one thing in mind, and then somebody can't show up, and then somebody else can't show up, and then next thing you know, you're just mumbling into this microphone in your bathroom while the housekeepers do their work. It's going to happen.
I kind of like that take on it.
Don't you do that on Periscope?
Yeah, I was going to say, you got your Periscope. I mean, come on. Why don't you just audio that and then stitch them together?
I did that little Periscope thing. Jake said, oh, yeah, I saw your Periscope watching you do your shtick. And I'm thinking,
did I say
you said shtick? And I'll tell you why I thought that was great. I thought, wow, I've got a shtick. This was cool.
You do have a shtick. I'm glad you took that as a compliment.
No, I loved it. I thought, are you kidding? It gave me legitimacy. It was like my favorite moment of the month.
If you didn't always have a better job, you could have been a comedian.
I feel like
but you had too good of a day job.
Yeah, maybe. I will say this. I've said it before, but I say it publicly. I just have such respect for what you guys do. I think it's so hard. I think I have, for example, because you mentioned me, command of the stage, and I've maybe quick in the moment in life, but I don't know that I'd be quick in the moment on stage. And look, I mean, I'm talking, you're an elite guy for decades now, but I just think the craft is so much harder than people think it is. So I congratulate you on being really fucking good at it.
Well, that's very nice.
I second the fucking good part.
You guys are sweet.
Jake, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Happy ride home.
Thank you.
It's downhill for the first 2 miles.
Do you want me to text you when I get there just so you know I'm safe, or would you just keep an eye? If my podcast comes out, I'm okay.
Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jake and J.Elvis Weinstein and Michael Shure. If you want to reach the show, there are 2 ways you can do it. One is through the website, edge-show.com, and the other is through our Gmail address, which is edgewithmarkthompson@gmail.com. Until next time, bye-bye.
Get more of The Edge on Stitcher and iTunes, or go to our website, edge-show.com.
edge-show.com.